Vikings. For a book about Vikings, the term is never used once, and I think that's pretty impressive. The Shadow of the Gods is a Norse, Scandinavian-inspired epic fantasy story written by John Gwynne and published in 2021, and is the start of the Bloodsworn Saga Trilogy, which was finished with the last book, The Fury of the Gods, published last October 2024. The story follows three main characters. Okra, a wife and mother who seems to have some sort of warrior background. She, along with her husband Thorkel, investigate the disappearance of a neighbor's child. Varg, an escaped slave who is seeking the magic of a witch or wizard to help him reveal a spell that will show who killed his sister. And Elvar, a warrior woman who is part of a warband called the Battle Grimm, who go around hunting monsters and those tainted by the blood of the old gods. And yes, this is footage from Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I haven't read anything by John Gwynne up to this point, though I have heard his name and I've seen his books in Barnes & Noble in the fantasy section or other bookstores, books where there are weapons similar to this on the cover. For some reason, I got the impression that these books were more historical fiction than fantasy fiction, similar to the Stephen R. Lawhead type books where historical fact was a big emphasis. And for some reason, that sort of made me want to steer away from them. And then I saw people talking about this book, and I just, man, look at the cover. It's incredible. The scale, the artwork, the dragon, the way you can just see the tiny little person facing this monstrous beast. It just says a lot. It's a very evocative cover, and it instantly drew my attention. And I'd seen that it had good score on Goodreads, and so not that that's the best way to measure whether a book is worth reading or not, but there is something to be said about the peer review and the populist opinion. So I picked it up, and it's fantastic. I loved it. I thought the action was really well paced. The story throughout has almost no wasted time. Everything is concise and to the point. Every time you see a character, every time we jump to a different point of view, there's always some action going on. There's some reason why they're there on the scene. And it just has this pace to it that is incredibly interesting and captivating. The world is beautiful and very real. The stories there are a part of the world. They're not just legends and myths that never happened. We see the bones of these old fallen gods. We see trolls. We see all these small little fairy type creatures. And all of it is just very real and very grounded in the world. And so you step into this story and you don't feel as though you're reading something where thousands of years ago some monsters existed, but it was just sort of a legend and nobody believes in them. No, this world, everyone knows that those things happen, and you see it in your day-to-day life. And it's very, very cool to see that Norse mythology, that Scandinavian-inspired story fill this page and fill this book so well. There is a good bit of fighting and conflict in this story. There is fight scenes throughout, and all of the characters are warriors or fighters to some degree. And a lot of those fight scenes are really action-packed and pretty epic. You feel like you're there. You feel like there's weight and stake to what is happening. And characters die. Characters perish, sometimes brutally. And the good thing about that is you really fear for all the characters. Anytime there's a perilous situation, there's no guarantee that the characters will make it out alive. So that is something that I think is done really, really well, because some of the characters that I just assumed would be with us to the end do perish, do die, sometimes brutal ways. And it lends to a feeling of dread and a feeling of worry for the characters that we're reading about. As I mentioned before, this is my first foray into John Gwynne. And while I've read plenty of other fantasy set in sort of a medieval time, I haven't read much in the Viking era, the Viking sort of skin on the fantasy genre. This was very cool. And it does seem like Vikings are maybe kind of hip or chic at this time. You've got shows like Viking. You've got video games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, as I mentioned before. You have God of War. The new God of War games are both Norse inspired. And there's plenty of other examples I'm sure that I'm not thinking of. I think Vinland Saga is kind of Norse inspired. That's an anime. So there's a lot right now, it seems like. And I think that's cool. I have not dived too deep into a lot of those. But Vikings are definitely one of the more renowned warrior classes. We just hold them to high esteem in society, and we look back on them with sort of this awe and reverence to the brutality and the strength that they inhabited. And so if there's more media like this, and I'll look at finishing the rest of the series here by John Gwynne, but I'm in for it. I like the Vikings. We'll stick with it. So before we get to spoilers, I just want to conclude with saying, yes, I think this book is fantastic. I would recommend it. It's 5 out of 5 stars easily for me. I just enjoyed it the whole time. It really made me want to keep reading. When I wasn't reading, I was thinking about it and I wanted to come back to it. And so when a book can do that for me and it can just pull me in and captivate me, that really does something. I think the POVs are all interesting. The characters are fun to follow along. And while sometimes the names caught me up a little bit, once I was aware of who I was reading about, it was fantastic. Again, there's hardly any fat in this book. It's all just very sharp, very clean, skeletal story writing in the best way. The muscle and the sinew is all there, and it's very sharp and poised, and it just lends for an epic reading experience. I see on Goodreads that the next 2 books are even more highly rated than the first book, and that's exciting. So we'll look forward to getting to those at some point. They're definitely on my list, and we will make another video for each of those when I read them once we get there. All right, spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. If you haven't read the book yet, don't watch the rest of this video. I'm gonna just throw some things out there that kind of would ruin the story if you haven't read it, and this is one that you don't want spoiled if you're interested in reading the book. Man, they slice hands a lot. There's a lot of blood cutting and making spells and making pacts by cutting their hands to have some blood action in that. It's interesting how it's done in this story, because sort of like with the world, it's all written to be very believed and very real. And so I think if this is a horror story or something where maybe it's like dark evil magic, that blood cutting would be seen as kind of this creepy, gross, evil magic kind of thing. But in this, it was just like, this is what they do. This is, I'm going to make a pact with somebody. We're going to draw blood, and it's going to be a blood pact. No magic involved. If we're going to do some sort of magic spell that requires some essence, it's going to be blood, and we're going to cut ourselves. And so that's really interesting way of doing it, because I didn't get the sense that it was this like evil, creepy action that was happening every time that took place. It was more so just, this is the way it was. This is just the way magic works. I do think that holding a sword after making some sort of blood magic pact like that, you've got this mark on your hand. That's brutal. That's just, you don't want to do anything. I've worked in construction for many years, and anytime you cut yourself anywhere on your usable parts of your hand, the inside of your hand, and even the outside when you're folding, you're gripping a hammer or something, but you have that wound there, and it's like, even though it's bandaged and even though it's healing, it's like you'll break that open. So that to me is a little bit hard to get around, because it's like, man, that's a lot of times some of these characters are cutting themselves and they still have to go about their daily life. And so that seems hard. I think there's better places to get that blood from than the palm of your hand. That's just me. As soon as Okra and her husband Thorkel spend some time together, if you know what I mean, and then she leaves to go visit this tree, I just instantly knew, it's like, oh, he's going to die. The bad thing is, something bad is going to happen, because she's out of the picture. She's going to come back and there's going to be some tragedy. And so I wasn't surprised there. And I wasn't necessarily annoyed. I understand it from a writing standpoint. Like, that's a good way to give them space so that the villains could come in and do some work. And so I think that's fine. But I did think, I did see that coming, I guess. And it just seemed like that's the way that it was written, which is okay. I did think that she would be pregnant by the end of the story. I thought, Thorkel makes that mention, oh, we should have another child. And then, that act happens, she leaves, etc. And I thought, okay, that's going to be kind of this reveal at the end of the story. And I guess the book doesn't, it's several weeks, so she maybe wouldn't know yet. I don't exactly know how the Vikings detect that kind of thing. They don't have pee strips like we do now. I was expecting she felt like a rumbling in her belly. Could it be like something like that? That's kind of what I was expecting. We didn't get that, and it's okay. But that was my expectation just reading into the story. I thought the city inside the snake's head, Snakovic, was very cool. That was a very cool visual. I thought the explanation of the thrall collars was really cool, how they were pieces of the chain from Ulfrir, the wolf god. That was really cool, and it made sense, because I was thinking the whole time, like, how are these metal collars, how does that work? And then just like this one paragraph explanation, it just nailed it. So that was really, really cool, really well done. I was surprised with Bjor's betrayal at the end. That scene was just shocking. Agnar defeats the Dragonborn son or whatever after kind of being tricked, because it's like, that's not really a fair fight. and he's sitting there. He's obviously wounded, and then Bjorn comes in and just spear, brutal. Was not expecting that at all. So that was another. That was a really good moment. Brutal, somewhat hard to read, but it was a good moment, good shock. So that one got me. I wasn't surprised that Varg was tainted. It just kind of felt like that made, like there was something there. There was a hint to it there, which I think was good. I think there was some leading up to that. John Gwynne was giving us a little bit of a hint there. But I was surprised that all of the Bloodsworn were also tainted. And I guess in the name Bloodsworn, it sort of makes sense. And they just, maybe had their test to see who else seemed like they were Bloodsworn, and then it just happened to be Varg. So that was an interesting bit for me. It was sad that his friend was killed, but it was, again, what I said earlier in the video. It really made me think, wow, characters are vulnerable. They will die. This is not just hand-holding and everybody lives. And so that was good in that sense. Uspa and Vol being sisters, that was cool. That was a kind of a cool little throw nod to kind of tie these stories together. And then Okra and Glornir being siblings-in-law, that was a kind of a cool little thing in the very final page of the story. And her being the skull splitter, I guess that wasn't that much of a surprise. While it wasn't directly like referenced earlier on, there was like this, who is the skull splitter, and she's this warrior. I don't know. I just kind of thought there would be something. And so while I didn't expect necessarily that, because I was expecting something, I wasn't that surprised. And again, that's not bad. Wasn't going into this book trying to be surprised at every turn, but it was just kind of a cool little reveal. And so I enjoyed that. That was good. I do think that once everybody starts going north to get to this, Vaesen pit and the tree at the end where this dragon Rivka is hiding, the pacing changed slightly because it was kind of like everybody's now on the same trajectory, the same path. And I understand that they're all kind of tied together, and that was the point. It was like three different stories that are bound together, but it was maybe a little bit too much. And I think things will probably spread apart as we're gonna have a war, and we're gonna have this giant dragon now a part of the world. And so that'll adjust things. And then the cover of book 2 has Ulfrir on it, it seems. So that's also very interesting. So I'm really excited to see what happens in book 2 and book 3. I don't have a whole lot of predictions. The pacing was so good that there was like almost no time to breathe and think about like what might be next. The only prediction I had, or the only thought that I had going forward, was like maybe Okra has a child, and that's the only thing. But I really couldn't say. I don't know anything. It seems, again, like the cover of Hunger of the Gods has Ulfrir on the cover. So it's like, is he alive still somehow? And we're going to have like another Ragnarok? I don't really know. So we'll see what happens. It's all very exciting. Book 1 ended on a really cool cliffhanger. I'm looking forward to reading book 2. I'm excited to just follow these characters across the battle plane once more and see where everything ends up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for following along, everybody. I love this book. I thought it was a lot of fun. If you've read it, let me know in the comments. If you haven't and you made it this far, let me know another Norse mythology, Scandinavian-inspired book that I should read, because I enjoyed the setting. I liked the Vikings. It was very cool, and I would like to read more of this type of thing. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.